I want to be absolutely clear at the outset. I welcome the decision by Keir Starmer to finally and fully authorise a statutory inquiry into the grooming gangs scandals that have traumatised so many lives across England. But I hope no one will confuse this overdue measure with exoneration. It's not absolution, it's obligation, and it's late. And the scandal, and we should drop the mealy-mouthed euphemism of grooming gangs and call it what it was, a systematic, racialised, racist, class-based abuse and exploitation of vulnerable young girls, should have prompted serious national reckoning decades ago, and it didn't. Why? Because this is not merely the failure of a single government, nor a single party, nor even a handful of councillors or police chiefs. It's a stain shared across administrations, local and national, Labour and Conservative alike. And yes, I include the Crown Prosecution Service under Sir Keir Starmer's leadership directly in that. So I want to I want to speak directly about people who accuse me of bias, because I get accused from both sides, and I find it extraordinary and irritating. And one person commented today, and I quote, "I noticed Tim saying this is not a time for point scoring, and he said the country is ready to commit. Tim has worded this video very carefully." Indeed I did. He's been very lenient to Labour. Had these crimes happened under another council, Tim's words would have been vile and definitely out to score points. No. Remember, Tim, as I know you do, these things happened under Labour councils. The cover-ups were ordered by Labour politicians. Starmer tried everything to block an investigation, and he's been forced to commit to one against his will. That was John Hastie, and thank you for your honesty, John. But I must equally answer plainly. I don't protect Labour. I don't belong to Labour. In fact, I have never shifted from the kind of conservatism that Norman St John Stevens once espoused. Thoughtful, compassionate, rooted in principle, not populism. And that made me, even in those days, a wet in Thatcher's terms, and I think I still am. The parties have changed around me. The parties have changed more than I have. So no, I don't excuse Labour. It was under Labour governments and Labour councils, Rotherham, Rochdale, or Oldham, that the first and most appalling betrayals took place. Warnings were ignored, whistleblowers were silenced, girls were left to be brutalised so that officials could cling to an illusion of community cohesion. Now, the interesting thing about whistleblowers is they don't need to apply and talk to their own MP. An MP is bound from any party, all parties, to respond to somebody who is a government whistleblower. So people who are whistleblowers, they can't be stopped. And MPs have a duty to listen and then raise their cases in Parliament if necessary. So the fact this hasn't happened is an indictment on the entire political system. This is a grotesque inversion of anti-racism, where the fear of appearing prejudiced trumped the duty to protect children, and yet the Conservatives have had 12 years to do something. Theresa May, to her credit, began the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, but that inquiry was too broad, too cautious, and lacked teeth. Under Priti Patel, rhetoric without reform, grandstanding without safeguarding, a leaked Home Office report in 2020, which could have helped explain the patterns behind these crimes, was delayed and sanitised. Structural reform still absent. So, this is a brief timeline of failure. From 1997 to 2010, Labour held power. Reports in Rotherham were buried, and Kraos was ignored. Whistleblowers were called racist. The rot set in. That's under Labour. 2010 to 2013, the coalition came to power. The CPS continued to fail victims. The police dragged their feet. Sarah Rowbotham had to fight tooth and nail for the Rochdale prosecutions to proceed. That's under the coalition. The Lib Dems and the Conservatives. In 2014, Professor Alexis Jay's Rotherham report exposed the horror of 1,400 victims, and still it took until 2025 for a specific statutory inquiry to be ordered. In 2015 to 2023, Conservative governments gave speeches, not solutions. Local safeguarding services were gutted, campaigners were dismissed. And only now, when Starmer is under pressure, does he finally give in. A statutory inquiry is promised, but questions remain. Why now? Why not when he was DPP? Why not when Labour MPs were first raising alarm? And why particularly have the whistleblowers been silenced for so many years? So I have a story about a whistleblower from the NHS, and I will detail it possibly later today. I'm not sure. And it's a story that pertains to David Davis's concerns over Lucy Letby, because I believe I have been given evidence that proves that the NHS, that people in the NHS doctor testimony before it goes to court. And I think the idea that false statements have been produced by the NHS, false statements are produced by officials to wriggle out of the problem so that other people can be scapegoated. This is what we've got in Rochdale, this is what we've got in these councils, and this is what we've got in the NHS. Why? Because the voice of whistleblowers, which should be protected, which should be heard, is not being heard. A whistleblower who writes to an MP of any political creed, of any constituency, should A, be heard, and B, their voice should then be repeated in the parliamentary chambers. That is the principle on which the whistleblowing laws were made. And they have been ignored and ignored and ignored. This is not tribal, this is national. And yes, many of the perpetrators in these cases were of South Asian, Muslim heritage. That should never have been a reason to ignore the truth. Nor should it now be an excuse for far-right point scoring or dog whistle blowing for racism. The victims were failed by those entrusted to protect them. Doesn't matter what their race or religion, what their views might be. Counsellors, police, social workers, prosecutors. Together they have not protected the victims. And a political culture more interested in reputation than in reality has persisted for years and years and years, and it needs to be challenged. And people who maintain their tribal obsessions, from Reform UK all the way through to Labour, are living in a fantasy world, and they need to grow up and stop being so stupid. I have nothing but contempt for tribalism. So what must come next? The inquiry must be fully independent with the power to compel witnesses. Survivors must be at its centre, not as props, but as protagonists. There must be a reckoning for institutions that colluded in silence. Safeguarding reforms must be properly funded, not just announced. And we, the public, commentators, ordinary people, subjects of His Majesty, must stop playing party games with child protection, must stop playing party games with politics and tribalism. This is not about whether one party is less guilty than another. It's about why so many children, why so many girls were treated as disposable property. When children cry for help and we ignore them, for fear of headlines, for fear of losing votes, for fear of awkward truths, we cease to be a serious country. It's not justice delayed, it's justice betrayed, and those responsible wear red and blue and yellow rosettes alike.